Let's go back to Canberra now. Joining us live is the Shadow Finance Minister Jane Hume, all ahead of today's budget. Jane, good to see you. Thanks for your time this morning. So we've got some early numbers out today. Deficit will more than halve this year before blowing out to pay for election commitments. That all heads into the next election. So what a story that'll be. But what's your assessment of the numbers out so far?
Well, I think, Pete, that this is a good sign that the coalition actually left the budget in a really and the economy in an improving position. Tax receipts are up because more people are employed. Unemployment when we left office obviously had a 3 in front of it and a downward trajectory, and lower welfare dependency means that the budget can be in a better space. That was why we were able to reduce the debt by $115 billion before we left office. But the real test is going to be for Labor in this budget, whether they can improve on that good economic position, that improving budgetary position, and at the same time reduce inflation, have a plan to reduce inflation back to that 2 to 3% range that the RBA works within, so that the RBA doesn't have to do all the heavy lifting, you know, not 1 foot on the brake and 1 foot on the pedal. But we also want to see at the same time a plan for cost of living relief, because that's really the number one issue that's facing Australians right now, whether it's at the grocery checkout, at the Bowser, or whether they're paying their mortgages. And we want to see also a plan for productive capacity and participation for economic growth in the future. That's the only way that you're going to be able to have a constantly improving budget bottom line and a constantly improving economy, rather than a slow and steady deterioration. Now, what we're seeing is that tendency for that high taxing, high spending budget that Labor is famous for. That's their bread and butter. We would like to see far more restraint. It's cutting their cloth to suit the times.
Okay, just backing up things. So you're not giving the current government any credit for the deficit halving this financial year?
Well, let's face it, they've been in office for less than 6 months now, and, quite frankly, the economic settings that they were left with put them in a position where they can improve the budget bottom line. What we want to make sure now is that they don't fritter that away with a high spending agenda. And we know that that's their natural instincts. Now, a lot of that spending has been kicked on for a couple of years, so they're saying, look, there's an improvement in the budget bottom line, that's terrific, but look at these declining deficits in previous years. Sure. It's so important to build on the good position that they've found themselves in, rather than fritter it away.
So from what you've seen so far, is that a high spending agenda?
Well, we know that they went to the election with $18 billion worth of spending, more spending than the coalition would have done. And I think that has increased over time. We've seen announcements of spending in areas that weren't part of their budget commitments, for instance, paid parental leave. And of course, the big ticket item, that $2.2 billion that's going to the suburban rail loop in Victoria, on Daniel Andrews' election wish list. This is an infrastructure commitment that has no foundation in a cost-benefit analysis, that hasn't been through Infrastructure Australia. They promised prior to the election that their spending would be quality spending, but this belies that. Okay,
defence spending had to rise though. More needed to be spent on aged care and health, plus paying down the huge debt. How much of that can really be avoided?
Well, we hear from Jim Chalmers that spending keeps going up, but that seems to be raising the white flag on spending. Part of your responsibility as a government is to contain spending, to contain that giant wish list that you've accumulated over 9 years in opposition, and to manage spending going forward. That's what a budget is all about. Now, we know that they want to get rid of those stage 3 tax cuts, but that couldn't be a worse thing. There isn't a worse thing that you could do, because they don't kick in for another 2 years when inflation is coming down, and that cost of living crisis that people are feeling every single day right now at the Bowser, at the checkout, and when they pay their mortgage, well, that's really going to start biting. The worst thing you could possibly do is deny them a tax cut in 2 years' time.
Yeah, I know.
But the most important thing is to keep that tax cut there, because that is essentially a brake on Labor's spending objectives. They want to get rid of that tax cut so that they don't have to work as hard. You work hard so Labor don't have to.
And stimulus may well be needed in 2 years' time, and it looks as though inflation is going to be about 2.5%, which is in the RBA's target band by then too. So that would certainly back up your point there. Just a couple of quick points before we go, Jane. It's been announced today a plan to build about 1 million homes in a state, federal and private partnership. Do you support that plan?
Well, I haven't seen any of the details of that. Of course, we would encourage more homes to be built. This has always been not just a state government, but also a local government imperative, releasing supply for those new building stocks. We want to make sure that there is, that we don't have those supply chain issues that push up the prices, and we want to understand why it is that superannuation funds need to be brought into this when there is plenty of private sector demand out there. So, let's wait and see what this policy looks like before we decide whether it's a good idea or not such a good idea.
OK, energy prices forecast to climb between 30 and 50% next year. Much of that, it's claimed, down to the ongoing war. Should the government be supporting households with extra funding on this?
Well, they've already promised $275 off your energy bills within the next 2 years. That was a promise made before the election. We've heard nothing about it since the election. In fact, we won't even hear Labor say the words $275 out loud. So I think they've already given up on that election commitment. But we want to see genuine help for cost of living relief for ordinary Australians. And it doesn't matter where it is that they're feeling it, at the groceries, at the Bowsers, at the checkout at the Bowser, when they're paying their mortgage. People are really doing it tough out there, and if Labor are listening, they will offer genuine cost of living relief, not in 2 years' time, not just for childcare, but right now.